Good afternoon. Now I'd like to bring the regular afternoon meeting of Township of Langley Council to order. And the first item on the agenda is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson moves. Councillor Ferguson seconds. All those in favour? Opposed? Carries. Next item is adoption of the minutes of the regular afternoon meeting of December the 2nd. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Kunst and seconder. Councillor Arneson, any errors or omissions? Councillor Long.
Item 11. Anyway, it talked about, my apologies, it talked about the $20 pass. Is that in the right meeting? And
well,
we
do
had
the minutes
said,
in front
I'm
of you.
pretty sure we'd said, well, we're waiting for a presentation on the whole pricing thing. It should be referred to that, but the minutes say that it's going to be referred for a report. It's not a big deal, I guess, but
Is it?
I just want to prove that I read them.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Do you have the minutes in front of you? So it's regarding the pass for
just
the youth or student pass. H2?
H2, but maybe I was wrong. Councilor Whitmarsh seconded it, that we refer it for that presentation that we were supposed to get.
Probably consider implementing. It's on page 4.
Minutes say that it's referred for report. I guess it's the same.
You okay with it? Okay.
Hopefully we'll get that Yeah.
Yeah.
So that report means the presentation, if that's, we don't want a separate report.
So would the minutes be more accurate saying report and presentation?
Sure.
Okay, that was the, okay. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is to motion to resolve in special close for the agenda and the on-table items. Can I have a motion, please? Yeah. Councillor Arneson, second. Councillor Whitmarsh and Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have 2 comments here. The first one is that I'd like to add a personnel item.
Oh, okay.
And the second one is I strongly object to item 2 on the on-table without legal counsel present. Strongly object to that being put in.
What are we talking about? Item 2.
Item 2
Okay, but that's a personnel you don't, we.
should not be on there at all.
Okay, that's fine. So you want to add that to closed, a legal item. Is that a legal item? Okay.
No, I'm declaring a conflict on 2. I'm not staying for that discussion.
That's fine. You can do that when you get into closed. You can make
Okay,
that. Yeah.
but what I want to do is add another matter, a personnel item.
Yeah, so personnel item and legal item. Okay. I'll get that clear. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, under H1, I'd like to discuss. Thank you. H1?
Sorry, personnel? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Richter is opposed. Well, they're all recorded. That's been our process for the last, I don't know, as long as I've been here. So we'll now move into close. Thank you. We'll now reconvene the afternoon meeting of Township of Langley Council. The next item is presentations. We have Superintendent Murray Power here from the Langley Detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to take over. Welcome here. Oh, I'll get your mic on, sure. All right.
Test. There we go.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. It's always a pleasure to come and speak with you folks. I think I usually strategize as to when and where I want to come and see any group of people, and I figured the council before Christmas would be a great day, but I do apologize. It looks like you have a full agenda. So we'll see what we can do to make sure you grab the salient points today, and I'll try to keep us on point and be as concise as we possibly can going forward. So what I want to do today is I want to cover off 4 particular areas that I think it's not nice to know. I think these are areas that you folks need to know what's going on in the township, partly from discussions with you individually or in closed session. We want to share with the community the State of the Union as it pertains to crime and policing. So to do that, I have a very short presentation on crime stats year-to-date 2018-2019. First off, second off, is be a little bit of long-term trends. We have some interesting stats for both 5-year and 13-year trends with regards to crime in the Township of Langley. Section number 3 is road safety, and why that's in here is because we probably, yourselves and myself at town halls, get more questions about road safety than any other topic. And so you don't have to listen to me for the entire presentation, I brought our new NCOIC of Traffic Section Sergeant Matthew LaBelle will present the traffic portion to you today, and he will identify, or he'll explain to you his strategies with regards to road safety. You'll understand what we do, why we do it, and what you should do to be safe out there. And then the last section is really, I wrote here discussion piece, but I'll be doing the talking until the end. And it's just as to what we want to do going forward with regards to growth in the township and how we want to determine our policing resources going forward. So those are the 4 areas that we're going to touch on. As I said, most of them are not too long in time. So one of the objectives is obviously crime reduction in any community. So are we going to get rid of all crime? No. Is any crime acceptable? Obviously the answer is no, but the reality is we have to accept that there's going to be a certain level of crime anywhere in the world. So, and I know you folks as mayor and council get peppered with questions in private and public forums with regards to, what are you doing about crime? So what I want to do is I want to give you some information so you can answer the questions and share it with the public online so that they can have the answers as well. As I said, we don't want to get rid of, we want to get rid of crime, but we can't get rid of all crime, but we want to assess trends, whether they be sharp spikes or just violent crime trends, and make sure that we jump on those appropriately. Fortunately, even with all the news, you do hear of gang violence in the Lower Mainland. Really, the number one policing concern with regards to citizens is always property crime. And that's no different in the Township of Langley. The property crime is the number one discussion point. I will briefly touch on organized crime, gang violence as we go through, and answer any questions later that you have on that. As I said, we're not going to get to zero with regards to any property crime trends. There is what I describe a floor with any crime type. So you can have reductions. We can be down 1%, down 2%, down 1%. We're not going to get down to zero. So what is the floor? I think we've hit the floor a couple times in the Township of Langley with regards to property crime. And then, of course, we do get our bounce up after that point in time. The realities in property crime world, people steal things. That has been going on forever, and it's not going to end anytime soon. But what we want to do with regards to your police service, the Langley RCMP, is really provide the highest level of service that we can to the community. And it's not cops and robbers. That's not what it's all about. It's dealing with all the emerging issues in society. You're well versed on most of them. Mental health issues, drug trends, social challenges of all natures. I'm so proud of the work our members do with little training. They become borderline psychologists on the sidewalk that can diffuse almost any situation. So we want to be able to respond to whatever the needs of the communities are. As I said, it's more than just cops and robbers. We are truly the first line of defense when it comes to making your community safe. And the acid test is, do people feel safe in the community? Every time I do a town hall, my first question is, do you feel safe? And if you don't feel safe, why don't you feel safe? Is it reality? Is it perception? We've had many discussions with you folks with regards to reality and perception. You can't change everybody's minds. My mom lived to 91, and I know how fearful she was. This wasn't in British Columbia, but there was no changing her mind. I get that. So we just have to be responsive to that and get out whatever messaging we can so that people, if they should feel safe, that they do feel safe. And conversely, if there is a public safety concern, make sure that we share that. So the first key area is, and this is very, very short, is 2018-2019 crime comparisons. And I'm going to show you a numbers chart, which are real numbers, and then I'm going to show you a graph that just shows, and what you're going to take from this is there's no real spike, there's no real upward or downward trend. Okay, so this is, we got away from percentages because they are only worth what they're worth. I'll just highlight 2 areas here where you'll see, you may have a question, increases, break and enter other, which is sheds, backyards, that type of stuff. They're up 50 incidences year over year. And the other major one is theft other, which is a grab bag of thefts, including wallets, cell phones, roommate theft, porch pirates, as a term we use for those types of packages. So those are the two, number drivers. But the other numbers are, as I like to say, are fairly flat. We do get trends during the year where we have some offenders get busy. The busy areas would be auto theft, and business break and enters tend to spike at different times of the year. We have some successful enforcement. They go to jail, and crime goes down. Funny how that works out. And then this is what those numbers look like on an actual graph. As you can see, pretty flat year over year. Should highlight, theft from auto being down is a good news story, but the bad news with theft from auto, it is the most preventable crime in any community. The next section, persons offenses, otherwise known as any violent offenses where we might have a victim of violence of some nature. I explained to you there will be a year-over-year increase because of the new scoring methods with Stats Canada. That's not anything that I gave you the sort of the written version before. But with regards to violent crime and crime reduction and prevention, violent crime is frustrating because aside from serial offenders who we would go out and target, it's a hard crime to prevent. How do you prevent domestic violence aside from education? So we do the best we can with education. How do you prevent bar fights? If people are going to drink too much and get into a fight, we have a visible presence, so we do what we can with regards to it. But violent crime is frustrating. What you want to know from your officer in charge for your detachment is, are we alive to serial offenders? Sexual serial offenders are probably the number one fear of any community. In my 5 years as the OIC here, I can think of 4 that we've had, unfortunately, in the detachment area. Unfortunately, I believe we caught them in probably their first offense. It was the nature of the offense that I say it would be serial because it was a complete stranger circumstance, and it's been quite some time since we've had one. But we see those, we pounce on that with all the resources we possibly can, and that's what you should expect from our detachment. Robberies, I've discussed robberies before with both councils, and unfortunately it's not like television with a well-planned, well-organized execution of a robbery. It is usually a drug-induced individual that doesn't think too well, gets away with the first couple, and we usually catch them by the third or fourth one. I can't think of a robbery series as we describe them, which is a series of robberies, obviously. Usually banks, convenience stores where they use the same modus operandi or MO. We catch most of those guys because they are drug addicted. They make a lot of mistakes, and we catch them. Between the video, physical evidence, DNA, we do a very good job. So the other robbery thing, when you look at robbery numbers, what is a robbery? Grabbing a cell phone off of somebody that was standing at a bus loop or something that would be considered a robbery. So robberies are a crime type. I go on about them. They are probably one of the higher levels of concerns that I have with regards to violent crime. Some go without saying, obviously, sex offenses, stranger sex offenses, and they're same graph with your persons offenses, showing no significant spikes or declines, and we'll try to keep the murder numbers as low as we possibly can.
A quick question. These are whole numbers, like for the year. They're not they're per capita, or
they're real numbers.
Real numbers, yeah.
Yep.
So per
So
capita.
actual incidences. Yeah, we tried to get away from per capitas
Okay.
and percentages because it was too confusing.
Okay, thanks.
And the last one with regards to offenses is, this is just a visual to show you, the blue line is persons offenses, this is a rate, and the orange is property crime, so that just shows you how many more property crime offenses take place compared to persons offenses. And this isn't all calls for service for the detachment. This is only criminal code offenses, which doesn't even make up half our calls for service. So, whether it be assist general public, a disturbance, a mental health situation that doesn't fit into a criminal code, those would be above and beyond this. But just gives you a perspective on the types of crime that we deal with on a significant nature. So I threw this slide in social media responsibility a little bit to hopefully be a benefit to your worship in council, because I do believe, I don't think I have to no surprise to anybody, there's a lot of unfair commentary that goes on in regards to social media. So it could also be looked at as surviving unfair criticism in social media when it comes to policing in your community. Some people, I've seen some of the comments online that aren't supported by any facts, and that's kind of frustrating. And they do sometimes take on a life of their own. So we are responsive to any questions, concerns, and we really want to answer most of them. A lot of times, unfortunately, those that are making the comments aren't willing to engage in a conversation where we can just educate them on real facts. So there is I feel sorry for, to be quite frank, some of the issues that you folks have to deal with on social media. Don't shy away from pushing those towards us for clarification as and when they arrive. We'll deal with those at any given time. Unfortunately, not all online discussions are based in fact. However, it's not all bad. Social media was quite beneficial in capturing one of those serial offenders that I referred to earlier on, because the word got out in the neighborhood, and that triggered the witness that knew who the offender was to get a hold of us. So there is good that comes from social media: police warnings, public safety advisories, etc.
And Councillor Long has a question. Councillor Long.
Thanks, it was only because it's about social media. Now, there was word, I think I heard somewhere, that perhaps the RCMP were going to be utilizing social media to report crimes. Is anything happening there?
We are hoping to have that. We are next up, and we are hoping to have that on side sometime soon.
Good, thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Woodward.
Maybe you can just fill me in, again, a new councillor. Maybe what is a social media report card?
Report card?
Yeah. What did Councillor Long call it?
Oh, it's reporting. It's online reporting.
Okay, so that's
So if you have a theft from your vehicle, you can go online and give us all the details instead of having to phone it in.
okay. So you'd be taking that on a website, not necessarily on. So you would take it on social media as well.
No, it'd be on our website.
On our website. Okay.
That's what I meant.
That's what you meant. You meant website. That's where I got confused.
Fair enough.
Sorry. Okay.
No,
Thank
fair
you.
enough.
Thanks.
Then moving forward quite quickly, there's only one slide on a 5-year trend. I'll do the 13-year trends later on. And this is just to highlight two areas which won't be news to you folks. The challenges, the two areas that really are driving calls for service, and some of the grind on our front line is mental health calls for service and homeless panhandling. And we use different methods to determine what types of files are related to that. You'll see the 2015 onward, there's no stats for mental health 2013, 2014, because in our records management, we have what you call a flag. So if there is any mental health piece to an investigation, whether it be domestic violence, suspicious person, or disturbance, we just click a box and it adds up the number of mental health files that have a mental health component to it. Hope that makes sense. We call it a mental health flag. So we've started flagging those since 2015. Steady rise. And homeless, it was funny because I looked at this, I'm thinking, man, this problem's been around for a few years now. That's why you don't see any spikes, because the problems have been there for a while. And I think I've been fairly consistent in my message on homelessness for the public and for yourselves, just to remind you, that is not the #1 driver of our crime in the community, or not the homeless folks, okay? They do their share of nuisance crimes. Some would call it small and property crimes. If you spend any time looking at what they actually have in their possession, I think they're doing some favors to people for some of the things that they might take, because they're not really in possession of very valuable stuff. Our prolific offender list, we have a unit, we have prolific offenders in the community. You might get 1 out of 15 that might be a homeless person. All the rest live in homes, have normal situations, but they're prolific offenders. They steal cars, they break into houses, they break into businesses. So just a reminder that homeless, it's an all-in, we're a full-on partner, and I'm quite excited about Creekstone opening up, having opened up now, and I think that's going to be a success story. And I've been on the record, I'll stay on the record. I think that structure, that model is something that could be adopted in more communities. We'd see some significant successes. So that is section 2, moving along at a fairly decent clip here. I'm going to introduce Sergeant Matt LaBelle, who we were fortunate enough to steal from Prince George RCMP, and he's got significant RCMP experience. And rather than me really crush and destroy what he knows about road safety, I'm going to let him tell you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah.
Superintendent Power, I appreciate that. I also wanted to, sometimes when you showed us that chart, that past chart there, if you want to go back one, if you can, it's hard for us to see the growth in crime rates and how they relate accordingly. Now, I know that Langley has always been a little bit lucky. I know when I talk about township, the city, sometimes we're different. When you compare what we have in Langley versus other communities, don't we usually have a lower crime than other communities? I say Surrey, I'm not going to pick on Surrey, but
Too late.
When you compare, too late. Can you help me out with that if I made that question?
Believe it or not, that answer is coming up. Give you a spoiler alert. We're going to be middle to high, not top. Middle section of lower mainland communities. We're going to be trending towards the top of the middle group. So overall, we do very well for organized crime. The gun violence is, you can tell where the issues are because it's in the newspaper. So we've been quite fortunate for a variety of reasons. But I would say, I guess hopefully what you're trying to say and what I always profess is the township and the city are very safe communities to live in. Very, I hate to use that term, reasonable crime rates for lack of a better term, but I'll let you folks determine that on your own. So Langley is not a bad place at all with regards to crime. Hope that answers your question.
Good.
Thanks. And I have one more question. Statistics are wonderful, like 13%, break and enters. Unless it's yours, then it's 100%.
That's right.
Councilor Richter.
Just a quick question. What is total CC offense rate? CC, what does it stand
Criminal
for?
code.
Criminal code.
So if the offense is in the criminal code, assault, break and enter, theft, anything that's in the criminal code, which does not include drugs.
Right. And I want to thank you as well for coming out today. These slides that you're showing us, can they be posted on a website so that we can direct people to go and have a look at them?
This is part of what we're trying to do is as long as yours are good? Yes. They can.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Move on to section 3, Sergeant LaBelle, and I will be back.
Real policing here, get traffic in. Where my heart is.
I know.
This will be easy then, Your Worship. Thank you for having me, Your Worship, and City Councilors. Thank you for having me, Superintendent Power. My name is Matt LaBelle, and I'm a sergeant and in charge of traffic for Langley jurisdiction. As the superintendent alluded to, I came from Prince George, and prior to that, Alberta, prior to that, Manitoba, prior to that, Alberta. So I've been around. 6 postings in 16 years. And here to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is traffic safety and increasing traffic safety specifically. 2 things just to be carte blanche with you is I do subscribe to the 3 E's of traffic safety. That is education, engineering, and enforcement, and I know exactly where my role is in those 3 E's. And secondly is that I do subscribe to and believe in the Vision Zero program, which is to reduce and eliminate all fatalities down to 0 for our jurisdiction. So who is Langley Traffic? Made up of 3 different teams, 2 enforcement teams, plus a criminal collision investigation team, and that's exactly that. There are collisions that are caused by criminal factors, such as dangerous driving causing bodily harm or death, impaired driving causing bodily harm or death, criminal negligence causing bodily harm or death, or sometimes the police are involved in a police pursuit. And those and all fatalities under the Motor Vehicle Act. That's that mandate for that team, and it is fully taxed right now with conducting some investigations of past and of most recent. And I have 2 enforcement teams who, I'll get to those folks in a moment. I also have some municipal support staff that work. Langley Traffic is made up of a number of people that have different experience. More advanced experience, more advanced training in terms of abilities that will enable them to conduct quality investigations, such as drug recognition experts like myself. Those people are trained to an international standard to facilitate a 12-step process to determine, 1, if somebody is impaired by drugs, And 2, how impaired are they by the drug? And 3, what drug or drug categories are causing that impairment? That's a special set of training and skills that come along with that. We also have qualified breath technicians. Those are the ones that take samples of breath into approved instruments, and those samples are used for criminal purposes through a scientific study. Motorcycle operators, collision investigators, criminal interdiction investigators, those are the folks that stop the semi-trucks full of drugs and cars full of millions of dollars of money, and find vans with firearms in them or stolen property, thank you, sir, or even human trafficking. Those are the ones that have those special set of skills to realize that something is not adding up here, and to keep on asking questions and keep on using some skills, other techniques that I won't get into, to able to apprehend those people and solve that crime. We also have major crime investigators, as well as team leaders and supervisors to provide that guidance to our frontline members. So what does Langley Traffic do? Well, we do 3 things. Number 1, we reduce serious injury and fatal collisions, period. How do we do that? Well, I look at known locations, and through selective and targeted enforcement programs of the high-risk driving behaviors in high-frequency corridors. It's a lot of words and big mouthful there. Basically, I look for where fatals and high-frequency collisions have occurred, and I work towards preventing them or eliminating them from occurring in the future by addressing the high-risk driving behaviors that are causing the serious injury and death at those locations. And studies have shown time again that it's 5 different behaviors that are causing that serious injury and death, and those are speeding, seatbelts, intersection-related violations, distracted driving, and impaired driving. And the number 6 factor is weather, and we can't control the weather yet. So we'll keep on doing the non-weather. So how do I choose where Langley Traffic does their enforcement? I have a criminal analyst at the detachment that compiled my data for the last 10 years, and I looked at serious injury, the criminal collisions that we responded to, as well as our fatals, and I mapped those out. I'm looking for patterns. I also mined data from ICBC, and their most recent statistics are from 2017. From there, I determined the high-risk corridors, seeing where I could put the best bang for my buck, the most return on my investment, in order to reduce and prevent those serious injury and fatal collisions from occurring in the future. And I developed an enforcement plan. So this slide here, my apologies, might be better on your screens. Each of those red triangles represent a collision that occurred in our jurisdiction in the last year. Each of those blue circles represent a criminal code offense that occurred in the last year. You might ask, why am I looking at criminal code offenses when I'm responsible for collisions? Well, I'm looking at patterns, and I'm looking at things, and I know that a traffic officer is a high visibility, is a visible police officer, and that we can catch somebody going to commit a crime or catch them after they've committed a crime just by being in the area at the right time. And ultimately, I looked at those last 10 years of serious injury and fatal collisions, and each of those red circles represents one of that. And I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for patterns of the collisions. I'm looking for patterns of the criminal code offenses. I'm looking for patterns of the fatals and serious injury collisions. And from there, I developed a list of 15 corridors that I believe are the high-risk locations where we should put our traffic officers in order to make a difference. Now, I'm not going to let anybody in on my true secret of what days we are working those locations. However, those are my 15 corridors. And each of those corridors is addressed 4 times per month. So 4 times per month we will be on the Langley bypass. 4 times per month we'll be on 208 Street. 4 times per month we'll be on 56th Avenue. 4 times per month we'll be on 16th Avenue. And thank you very much for installing those pullouts for us. Number 2 of 3 things that Langley Traffic does is detect and apprehend impaired drivers through increased number of impaired drivers charged, apprehended through dedicated enforcement and education. We provide training and expertise to our other police partners, our jurisdictional boundary partners, CVSE, CBSA, Abbotsford Police, Surrey, RCMP. We do that through a series of check stops, counterattack, roadblocks, whatever word or synonym you want to use for that. It's the same thing. It's high volume vehicle stops. Stopping a large amount of vehicles in a short amount of time, screening for impaired drivers. Very quickly, in, out, on you go. If you have done nothing wrong, you're not jammed up for any length of time. We use that through we also use our advanced techniques through drug recognition expert breath samples, standardized field sobriety testing, and approved screening devices. Some people may have seen this exact image at their driver's door. Hopefully nobody has seen this one. Oh, your worship, you can do it. And third of 3, what does Langley Traffic do? Well, we target and apprehend prolific and prohibited drivers. So we do that through information sharing and advanced apprehension techniques. Basically, there's people out there that don't care if the province has suspended or prohibited a license. They don't care if we, the police, have suspended them or prohibited them from driving. They're going to continue driving for whatever risk or no risk that they seem fit, and we're going to catch those people. There's a huge increase in prohibited drivers in this province compared to other provinces I've worked in, and it absolutely shocks and amazes me that every day we catch prohibited drivers, and they all know it. They all know that they are prohibited, but yet they're risking that out and continuing to drive. So we do that through information sharing from Crime Stoppers, complaints from the public, and other agencies. So a police officer might serve somebody a prohibition notice at the side of the road, and this person might say, in so many words, I'm going to continue driving. We'll know that. And if their neighbor or their brother might call in to Crime Stoppers, or they might call in to the police themselves and say, this person is driving prohibited, and we'll go catch them. We'll sit outside their house and wait for them to drive, and we'll charge them, and we'll take their vehicle away. We'll sit outside where they work, and we will catch them, and we will take their vehicle away. You've been told you can't drive, you can't drive.
Councillor Ricker, do you want to ask a question now?
Yeah. How prolific is this problem of these prohibited drivers? Do we have a lot of them in Langley?
I don't have the exact numbers of prohibited drivers that we have in this in our jurisdiction. There's an information sharing with ICBC that's not there. However, my experience is that there is a high number of prohibited drivers driving that shouldn't be driving. In terms of the prolific side of that sentence of my statement of target and apprehend prolific and prohibited drivers, those are the people that are a danger, and we get the calls on them that they are driving crazy or absolutely wild or blowing red lights or this and that, and those are the ones we're going to target. It is those high risk drivers that need to have some police attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was me last week in the township. That's 69 kilometers over the limit. Not me in that car. I was in the other car. 63. So the public, what can the public do to help, or what the message is that we're giving out to the public is, if you witness criminal driving behavior, the word is criminal driving behavior, call 911. That's impaired driving, dangerous driving, a major hit and run. That's urgent. That's emergent. That's an emergency. Call 911. That's what that process is set up for. What if you witness a motor vehicle act offense? Cell phone, red light, prohibited driving, no insurance. Well, I need willing participants in our process. So please call the RCMP and report. All I need is a statement, the license plate that matches the description, and your willingness to go to court, and I can charge the registered owner of that vehicle. We need to get away, and notice speeding is on that list. Speeding is a difficult complaint to respond to because an average citizen cannot provide evidence on speeding. It needs to be from a certified measurement. There needs to be a measurement of the speed, and the average citizen doesn't have, they don't have those tools that we have, radars and lasers. They don't have the certified stopwatches that we have, and they don't have the expert, not all of us, I don't have the expert designation as a speed estimator in court. We do have those. So I need that willing participant that's going to go along with our program. We need to have people that don't just pick up the phone saying, I saw somebody run a red light there, I've done my job as a citizen, a concerned citizen. No, I need somebody to actually participate and go with us to the end, and that includes if this person says I didn't do that, well, that person who made the call needs to come to court and tell the judge their story of what they saw, because I didn't see it. And RCMP will not set up a speed trap in front of your house. We get that call every day. Come use my driveway, come use my lawn, we'll give you lunch if you pull over people in front of my house.
That would mean at the homeowner's request.
Correct.
You will set up speed traps in front of people's houses.
We will set up where we need to do it on those 15 corridors, but we won't at their request. That's correct, Your Worship. I feel like I've talked too much, but if you have any questions, feel free.
Councillor Kunst?
Mine is cannabis related. So has the RCMP developed any better mechanism to find out if someone is impaired because of cannabis? Or is it still where it was before?
That has not changed much. They're talking, there is, the RCMP has purchased and has been involved in saliva testing for cannabis, but that's a screening mechanism only at the roadside, much like we screen for alcohol with a roadside sample. That's not used in court. That's just to get that officer from a suspicion that that person has consumed cannabis to the point of, oh, they're impaired by cannabis. We still have to go through the 12-step drug recognition expert evaluation. We still have to obtain a blood sample or a urine sample. We still have to get that sent away to the lab. We still have to get that analyzed and confirmed that cannabis or the active metabolite of it, THC, is within the urine or the blood. And only then can we charge that person with impaired driving. So that has not changed. The only thing that is new is obviously the legalization of cannabis and also this roadside saliva screening tool, but we don't have that in Langley. We don't have that at the Langley detachment.
Okay, thank you.
Just following up, is it legal to demand, is there a blood or a urine sample, or do you have to do that through warrant after an accident?
For cannabis?
For any
Sorry.
drug. The drug recognition expert, can they demand a blood if they have reasonable grounds to believe that it's impaired by?
So after the 12-step evaluation, Your Worship, only the drug recognition expert has the ability or the legal authority to make that demand for urine, blood, or other.
That's in the code now.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thanks. When I took it, it wasn't. So, Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes, thank you, Sergeant LaBelle, and I'm not sure if you or Superintendent Power, I want to answer. I was happy to see in your statistics that the mail theft is down significantly where it was a number of years ago, and I remember talking to the superintendent of the day and phoning him up and saying, oh, by the way, what can you tell me about community mailboxes? And there was silence, and all of a sudden, don't get me started on community mailboxes. And since then, I think they've replaced virtually every one in the Lower Mainland, and they're certainly a heck of a lot better. My main question is, it seems to be a new concept everywhere I go, torched cars. And just down the street there was one not too long ago, and you see what the road looks like afterwards. So what can you tell me about the torch cars, or why are they doing it? What's going on with that?
Well, there's definitely instances where vehicles catch on fire because of poor maintenance, right? That they have a gasoline leak or something to that effect. They've been overheated. Nothing's worked properly. So in terms of a road safety standpoint, we definitely are looking for those vehicles when we stop them to say, hey, this isn't right. Something's not right with your vehicle. We're sending it for an inspection. And we do that all the time. Different methods for that, whether it's immediate, you need to get that vehicle off the road. We're going to tow it for you to the shop of your choice to get those remedies fixed, or I'm going to give you 30 days. Here's a 30-day notice that you have to get it yourself fixed. Your vehicle fixed and re-inspected before it goes back on the road. Now, in terms of criminality involved with that, I'll leave that to the superintendent.
You know, that's what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, quite simply, it's been in the paper, so I'm not really breaking any news. It's quite often after a shooting, vehicles get torched, usually within a few kilometers. That pattern does continue, and in Langley, we've had our fair share of either our own murder vehicles or neighboring detachments' murder vehicles showing up. So it's become an MO for the shooters. They're always a stolen car, so that's kind of what's going on there.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your information. It's very interesting. I just want to pick up on your 15 corridors. And I understand from your perspective about analyzing and having rational coverage over these particular areas. I'm just wondering from your recent perspective, is there anything you could tell us about focusing on school zones as opposed to these other areas? Is that a matter of more resources or just sort of a realignment potentially of some of the coverage?
No, I arrived here this year right in the midst of school zones, and I redeployed resources immediately upon my arrival, but my practice is always the month of September is school zone speed enforcement. End of story.
Great, yeah, safety first.
Correct. It's also a good reminder for those of the motoring public that forget that, hey, there's a school zone coming up, that we need to be reminded of that. And like I said about the 3 E's of traffic safety, I know exactly where my role is in that, and we will conduct the enforcement in school zones. Each of those locations has a school zone that's near it or within it. And so we obviously will be working in that in all aspects of it.
I just had a secondary question based on something that a citizen asked me. So sometimes people get really frustrated about traffic situations that they see, and they don't see anybody that's doing enforcement at that immediate time. So there's equipment that's available to the public to go out there and do sort of an informal assessment about how fast people are going. So I'm just wondering whether or not I've actually personally cautioned that person to be very careful to do that, because people recognize that you're actually calculating their speed when they're going by. Is there any relevance to that information going to the police? Because if it's something that's done on an informal piece of equipment that way, would that be helpful in any way, or just not bother?
Not at all. I've spoken to somebody recently about that in our community. It might be the same person, but I'll go back to that evidence piece of speeding. As police officers, in order to write a speeding ticket, we need to show that we are trained and certified in the use of the radar or the laser that we use. If we are in an airplane or helicopter and we're measuring on fixed distances on the road, we need to show that our stopwatches are certified and accurate. We need to show that an engineer painted those lines in the road at exact distances, and we need to produce that engineering certificate to show the distance so that it's exactly precise. And when it comes to an expert evidence to say, well, that vehicle was speeding, I saw it with my own eyes and speeding, I don't have that designation in court. That's a court, only a judge can issue that to a police officer after years and years of knowledge, training, experience in providing testimony to that judge. And only the judge can say, yes, that officer is an expert in observing speed. So to the average person that wants to measure their own speed or calculate their own speed or acquire an old radar or laser, whatever the case may be, it will not fly in court. And so to provide that information as a request to, hey, give this person a ticket, I saw them speeding and here I used this awesome technology from 1982 and it measured it, we can't do it.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, when you started talking about the engineering, actually an issue came up just recently with a resident who lives on 216th Street in Murrayville, around where the roundabout is. And she called and she told me that there's a consistent speeding problem in that section, and people go into that roundabout too quickly, and they've ended up taking our hedge out, our fence out, and everything. Do you look at engineering standards for situations like that? Like, is there stuff that you can give us advice on?
Yes.
On how to fix it so that we could slow those speeders down? Or
Absolutely.
Yep.
But I'm not the one. I'm not the engineer
Yeah.
that would review that. I go back to the 3 E's of traffic safety: the education, the engineering, the enforcement. I know where we stand. We're going to conduct the enforcement. But if something like that came up and they said, hey, they're speeding at this 216th roundabout, well, 216 is on my list. It's going to be there. We're going to be there 4 times per month to conduct enforcement somewhere along 216th. I'll let my frontline officers decide exactly where, and for them to have the most impact. But if it comes back to regularly that people, the enforcement's not working, maybe the education piece is not working, I have partners in the Township of Langley in the engineering department, and I speak with those people regularly, and that's something that we would bring up, is to say, hey, I'm hearing from the RCMP side is that 216th is having an issue, and perhaps maybe you guys need to relook at your calculations and see where you're at, and likely that's not going to be the solution, or that's not going to be the problem. They're not going to go, oh, shoot, we forgot to carry the 1, right? No, it's not going to be the case. It's going to be that maybe we need to add some traffic calming measures to that location. Maybe we need to look at sight lines. Maybe we need to change visibility. Maybe we need to add other things to slow people down prior to reaching that roundabout on 216th Street. Yeah. So there's lots of solutions out there. Enforcement is not the solution, it's one of the solutions.
Okay. Well, maybe the next time you have a meeting, maybe you could take a look at that roundabout and see if there is some design issue there that may be leading to it. I think it's because you come down the hill and people just come down that hill too fast. Yeah.
I will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. One quick question. We fund the integrated teams, ICARS is one of them, and you mentioned you have a team, one of your teams is for collision investigation. So where does ICARS fit in is it the integrated team? Do we use them, or we're putting funding towards it?
Yeah, we absolutely do, Your Worship. So the collision investigators that I was referring to is a level 2 collision investigator. They can handle anything where there's not serious injury or death. It's when we have those other types where we need to call in a level 3 or level 4 collision investigator, and those people reside normally in ICARS. So we rely upon them. We bring them in for our major investigations to provide to find that forensic evidence and do those measurements that comes with that training and experience.
Okay, thank you. I think that's our traffic related questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, ICARS is a full partner. We own the file. ICARS provides the technical support.
Oh, they do the technical investigation?
Yep.
Okay. They don't go further when it...
Nope.
Okay.
So the last section, if you haven't paid attention, that's fine. Now you have to pay attention, okay? And just so you know, we do have in hard copy, because it wouldn't look good on the screen here, is the main stats for property offenses and persons offenses. We have on one sheet 13 years worth of data, real numbers as opposed to percentages, so I can leave these with the clerk, and you can have them to peruse. We still don't know why there was a significant dip in 2009, so it's a mystery. So the going forward, the last section that I want to talk about is a little bit of policing today, and sort of end off with where do we want to go going forward. Just give you food for thought. No decisions today, and I wanted to again, back to the strategy of coming before Christmas, hoping it was going to be a quiet day for you, is to give you folks time to digest where we are and where we want to go, as opposed to doing this in the middle of budget season when you're inundated with a lot of information. So this should give us lots of time to have further conversation as we go forward. I'll give you a bit of information here, and then we'll see where we go from there. So where are we better and more efficient? Policing is not always a bad story. A lot of times you get persons in my position come and a tale of woe, but it's not all bad. We do a lot of things more efficiently now. We just talked about URSU, which is a coordinated road enforcement team, so that's much more efficient. They're concentrated. You're well versed in IHIT. That is not because I used to work there, but it's the best insurance policy you could buy is the IHIT insurance policy. That one IHIT file could run you into million or millions of dollars, and the integrated approach is so significant there. Other integrated teams, emergency response team, ICARs, we just talked about, police dogs, Impact, which is auto theft reduction. They have the bait cars. A lot of great coordination goes on, and this isn't just an RCMP story. This is a Lower Mainland policing story, because most of these integrated teams are from municipal agencies as well. Computers in the cars, what your worship and I used to do at a desk is they don't come into the detachment. Everything is in their car, and I almost think I should videotape our young members leaving the detachment, because they walk right past my car in the morning, and the only thing missing is a red wagon to cart all the tools that they require in their car, between 2 ASDs and carbines and all kinds of weapons and stuff like that. So our technological advances are really, really quite effective and efficient, and we are much, much better. Of course, there are still, it doesn't mean there's not challenges with police as we go forward. And I just looked at the two in front of me. This one's going to have more things pop up on it. But, some files take longer to do it. And, you've heard this before. Domestic violence investigations that used to take 2 hours might take 6 or 7 hours. It might take multiple days now, just depending on the significance of the crime. Right above, right under the word then, it says EDR and infotainment systems. Seeing we just talked about traffic. The information that we can glean from a download from a vehicle now is phenomenal. And if your cell phone's hooked up to your vehicle, there's more information being gleaned from the vehicle. But the vehicle itself, all its actions, all its speeds, doors opening, doors closing, stopping, GPS, it's all gatherable information that we can get from a vehicle now, and iCars does that for us. But that's a huge step forward, but it's a lot. Then here's the burden. You get saddled with 1,500-page document of disclosure. And somewhere in there could be gold, but at the same time, managing that number, that information is quite significant. And you'll see a lot of technological stuff, mail theft. Frauds, identity theft. You're well versed in. So policing challenges, they do continue to surface. We try to address them as best as we possibly can. On the left-hand side, you see video canvas and follow-up. Video has been a godsend. Residential video, business video, community video. It's a godsend for solving all types of crime. The courts are actually getting so used to it that is becoming the best evidence, but it takes a lot of time to go and canvas for the video, secure the video, then review the video. It doesn't just magically pop up. So it's just trying to give you, different ideas of things that take more time as we move forward. No surprise here. This is just I thought it would be higher. I talked about that mental health flag. So this just is an increase in the township. Mind you, we're getting almost 100% increase from 1,000 to 2,000 files with a mental health component. Doesn't mean it's a crisis file, but there is a mental health component to the file. No surprise here. Cybercrime. In here, one I wanted to touch on. It's becoming a community crisis, and I don't want to say police crisis yet, but I have serious concerns about police because we're getting inundated with child pornography investigations. The technology exists in different areas to determine who is uploading and downloading child porn. Our headquarters in Green Timbers, they're the dealers. They capture this information, and my fear is what's behind them is, they're having trouble managing it, and they're dealing these out to every detachment. We have probably the same rate per capita as any other community, but the numbers are quite significant. And then I'll just walk you through a quick child porn investigation. We get the information, we get the IP address through a search warrant, we figure out the residents, we figure out who lives there, we go and we do our business, we do a search warrant, secure the electronic devices, then follow that up with a search warrant for the computer, and then we have to scan the electronic device, computer, what it might be, for child porn images. We had one file that had 800,000 images. So while that sounds horrendous, think a member had to look at every one of those, okay, and determine what is and what isn't. We're having a problem. We're trying to spread that pain as farther and wider within the detachment. So child porn is becoming near and dear to my heart as a community crisis and a policing crisis going forward. We've had discussions in the detachment how we're going to minimize the impact on the members, because I don't think anybody that joined policing thought that that would be something that they wanted to do, but somebody has to do it. That's not lost on us, but it is something that none of us were really wired to view on a regular basis. So a significant concern. And other cyber crime, a lot of identity thefts. That's no surprise to you folks that should be a high happening thing. Another trend, homeless. Good news here, you see a little bit of a dip. Homeless and panhandling, and of course the 2012 onward, we see a little bit of a spike upward in homeless-related calls. Now here is a 13-year trend that basically the message here is pretty flat over a 13-year period, and that's going to be a rate thing. That's per capita, so the actual numbers will increase, but your population is increased, so that's population-based. So as you can see, a bit of a spike. There was a lower mainland spike in property crime in 2016, but all in all, you can see a fairly steady pace with regards to property crime in the township. And then auto crime, significant moves forward. You get less numbers on auto crime, so you'll see a wilder swings. But the good news about auto crime, the bad news about auto crime is it's a small number of those that are involved. Once we catch them, the numbers drop dramatically. Once they're out of jail, they rise dramatically. It doesn't mean we don't know who they are, but which is good news. It's always tough when you're trying to chase a ghost, but when you know who the offenders are, you have a step forward. The bait car program, another great program, 100% guilty pleas in court. I don't think there's ever been a bait car trial in the province of British Columbia. Of course, you're on video in a stolen car. It's pretty hard to defend that. So that's a good news story. And then I have a note here, Impact, that auto theft integrated team, they advised a release that Langley's theft from autostats are down for 15 straight weeks, which is a nice, good news story, but the realist in me tells me enjoy it while it lasts. Just general theft, again, a little bit of a spike 2016 onward. We'd have to drill down into a little bit more numbers, but you can also start looking at opioid epidemics and the impact on society with regards to that. And this is just general thefts. Councillor Ferguson's question earlier about where does Langley stand, and property offences per inhabitant. So that's one way of looking at it. And as I said, Langley kind of strikes up in there in this upper middle sort of area. And this is mostly Lower Mainland, Comox Valley's in there as well. So it gives you a bit of a sense of where we stand, and a little bit better off persons offenses, and those are the violent crime offenses per inhabitant. So that's just one way of looking at crime in a visual. So on the police growth question, so we can look at workload comparison to other jurisdictions, and that caseload question on the right-hand side. So that's residents per, let me back up. Start on the left. Residents per police resources, 918 residents for every one police resource in the township of Langley. It's getting to, I can honestly say, our numbers are getting to a concerning level for me with regards to what we call pop to cop. On the left side is caseload, and then you see 57. So if you took every single member in the detachment and multiply that by 57, including myself, who doesn't do any of those 57, then you get your criminal code cases per for a detachment. So it's a measuring stick, and remember, criminal code cases account for less than half of our calls for service. It is a measuring stick that is something that we can consider when we look at what we want our detachment to deal with. No surprise here, the city growth has been fairly stagnant, a few hundred, maybe 1,000 or two here or there, and the township growth, again, it's a success story where we have our 2019 projections, so it puts you up 20,000 over the last 5-year period. And rate percentage growth per year. And I'll go back to the our favorite term, cop to pop ratio. This takes us up over 900 for the 2019 projection. When I got here, when I first took this job, we were under 800 per police officer, and now we're up over 900, and it looks like probably in the 925 range with that graph. So we'd have to look at what is a comfortable police to population ratio for the detachment.
A couple of questions, maybe. Take them now. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, can you go back to the population slide?
One more.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we don't have 140,000 people in Langley Township? Oh, it's Langley overall, so you've added in both the city and the township.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Didn't do the separation, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Now
Sorry
I
about that.
understand. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, can you go back
It's
to
not on-
a couple of slides where,
As long as it's
No,
not a
you're
question
going
on
the wrong way.
mail theft.
no, not mail
Okay,
theft,
good.
no, go back to where you compared, we're up with Richmond and
on one of
Burnaby and about the constables. Okay, I think this is the one. Okay, yeah. I was really, really surprised to see the residents per police. That means that's for Richmond, 933 for one officer. That's how it works.
And that's changing as you may or may not know. They've just approved 20, 30, or 40 more members to get that number down.
Okay, so yeah, well, all I can do is look at this right now.
Yes, fair
because
enough.
the
Yep.
reason why I'm saying this, because I was almost shocked because you have 3 of the richest communities probably in the whole country there, and that's Burnaby by far the number one, I would think. Coquitlam, not too far behind, in Richmond, they all have casinos, and Burnaby's got all sorts of money in reserve. So I'm surprised their cars aren't driving around in gold cars or Ferraris or something. I mean, they have significantly more, Superintendent Power, resources than a community like Langley, even though we're a larger residential area we're 303 or something square kilometers in there. So we have a bigger jurisdiction to cover, and it's that much more difficult. But we don't have those huge casino and reserve monies. And I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
That's a fair comment, and their populations are quite. I think they're almost doubled what the township is as well. So,
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, just to go back to the caseload here of the 918 residents per police resource, what's the cap? Like, at what point does it spill over? If we hit 1,000 residents per officer, we got to start adding more?
It's almost like you're cheating at my notes here, because
Oh,
it's
okay.
almost a term that I said. We're almost getting to the tipping point.
Yeah.
It was a term I wanted to say, but I don't want to dictate. That's why I kind of want to stimulate the conversation as to what are we comfortable with. Because there's so many factors. I could inundate you with stats till the cows come home. We'd have to collectively determine what's important to the township, because there are varying factors. When you have the geographical size, the response time becomes an issue physically getting to different areas. But then we have the density up the 208 corridor, which is a whole different type of policing, where you can do more with less, because there's so many people close by, but so many more people. You have crime. People bring things get stolen. So you go back and forth, and I have a number in my head, but at this point in time, I'll just till we figure out where we want to go. I think we do have to make a move, which I will suggest at the end of this presentation.
Thank you.
To put a visual on police to population. So here we go. This is one of my favorite things. This is 208th, and as you can see, Yorkson School is up at the top there. On the left center side, you see, I think it's about 6 townhouse buildings. And those 6 buildings, I just asked our folks to find out how many units. So in those 6 buildings, not including the townhouses on the right-hand side that aren't finished yet, there's 360 units from the 6 buildings. And if you average 3 people per unit, which I think is a fair conservative estimate, that gives you 1,080 people. So you're looking at 1.25 police officers for that half of a block. So I say that because every time I drive up, I get stressed when I go up, and it's a success story that the growth up 80th or 208 area is. I look at the number of people coming and what is the best way to police this growing. We have holes in the ground, we have buildings coming, and the people are going to start coming. So I don't want us to fall behind with regards to their public safety, but as you drive around, at least if you look at something like this, and then you can look, I think it'll give you a visual thought when you're going around the community as to what the needs are going forward as in regard to a visual consideration. Police strength, and this just tells the numbers that we've had since 2007. Steady growth. As I said, I think you've been fair. I think we've been providing a really good service. We're just kind of hitting that tipping point, as it would be over the next year, that we want to discuss. This pretty much the last piece of information for you to digest here. So the blue ones, residents per police, you've heard enough about that, so that just puts the number on there. What I want to draw your attention to is the yellow line there. The orange line is person's offenses or total criminal code clearance, and clearance means identified a suspect, arrested somebody, so we know who did the crime, whether we can charge them or not. So that's in our clearance rate. But the yellow line is the property offense, which is, of course, is the driving concern for most lower mainland communities, and the township's no different. So as we see our police to population ratio stretch, we can see a decline in our clearance rates, which means we're probably catching fewer people than we should. And is it as simple as more police officers on the street, potentially? That's one piece of the solution, but we have seen, when you see I think it was 5% drop over a 5-year period in our clearance rate. A little bit concerning to myself and with regards to that. And again, it's not like we don't know who the offenders are. It's trying to put the evidence together to make sure we get that. So that kind of explains that slide, which you can digest. And the financial accountability piece, which I kind of just threw in there, is just a reminder. I thought about this coming to work today. I always like to portray ourselves as good community partners. Over the last 5 years, we've probably, obviously worked well within our budget, because we've returned anywhere from $10 to $15 million from our budget over the last 5 years. So some of that comes from a vacancy pattern. And a good chunk of it comes from, I think, responsible management and a little bit of luck, because if you get a shooting circumstance, to give you an example, because I know how these investigations go, just one of Surrey's shooting incidences over the last few years where you have multiple shots fired, you got one gang against another gang. I know the investigative techniques that were imparted, they're very, very expensive, they're very, very time consuming, and your costs go from flat to skyrocketing. So if we really ended up in a situation where we were unfortunate that some gangsters moved to town and decided to have a turf war in the township, that's where you run into very significant files that are not IHIT specific files. So just wanted to just a reminder that not all the money that we give back goes back in other revenues. I've looked into that. Half of it goes into a policing budget for other purposes. So that is kind of the last piece that I want you to digest today. And we have multiple, and I have the document that I gave you last time, which you can also have, and that just shows police to pop to cop ratio, cost per capita, where the township is in the lower end. I think we have on 2017 numbers, criminal code rate, calls for service, changing social dynamics, challenges and demands around technology, community expectations, police officer wellness. And then just on that piece, if the dangers of falling behind, if we start falling behind, so what happens? We get more people in the community, more calls for service, which are understandable. If the members don't stay with that rate to a certain level, then all of a sudden we start getting more sickness because the members get a little bit frustrated, and it is so our sick time goes up. and then that starts to affect morale. And once morale in a police station goes down, then who suffers is actually the community, because our productivity, our quality of service starts to dip. I don't want to get there. I always tell people, I says, we're in the Goldilocks zone in Langley, and I've been very, very fortunate, but I think we're hitting the end of that time. So over the next year, if we really digest what we want to do, and I'm going to put a crazy number in your head, but I really do think, the next budget cycle, we want to start looking at, maybe 15 police officers to get ourselves into the appropriate level, so we do not run into this problem with all the people coming into this community. So got to get the sticker shock off out there, and we'll go forward from there. But we do have time to discuss this further as we go forward. But it is a hard business to catch up in, as I know you're well aware of. If you see what's in the news, it is a very difficult business to catch up in. So we have a chance to stay with the curve, not necessarily ahead of the curve. So that, Mayor and Council, is all I have for you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councilor Ritter.
Yeah, sticker shock. How much does it cost to put one officer on the road for 1 year now?
I believe with all the overhead, about 160.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Very in-depth, lots of information for us to digest, and thanks for throwing a number out there. I know it's a big part of what we have to decide moving forward in our growing community. So, I do want to thank you and Sergeant LaBelle for your presentation. So, thank you.
Thank you for your time, and have a great holiday season, folks.
Okay, so now we'll move on to delegations. First delegation is Mr. Dan Mooney. Please come forward. And just for the both delegations' information, you have 5 minutes, not including time for questions from council. And there's lights in front of you, and it'll flash, and then it'll go solid red when the time is up, just so to give you a little hint. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Froese, members of council. I'll try and keep my comments brief. I did submit a 3-page document to you, and I understand it was received. I appreciate a number of councillors that reached out to us over the weekend. My name is Dan Mooney. I'm here with my wife, Jackie. Jackie and I have resided at 2084 198th Street since 1992 and raised our 3 daughters. We've lived in the community for 28 years. I've also practiced in the field of transportation planning. I'm also a big believer in the 3 E's, as my role is the engineering in traffic safety. So I've served in 6 different municipalities, as well as the Provincial Ministry of Highways, over 38 years. 2 years here at the Township of Langley on staff. I also, to give back to the community, I participated in the paid-on-call firefighters in the Brookswood Hall 5 area for 10 years and attended a number of very serious and fatal car crashes in our area. I have personal knowledge and professional knowledge that I'd like to share with council, and specifically in respect to the intersection of 24th Avenue at 196th Street in the Surrey boundary, and the decisions that you made on November 18th, 2019 regarding closing the road. I want to start with Transportation Planning 101, and that's the road network. We developed road networks in the community plan, in our master transportation plan. It was done in the Brookswood plan, and it's done in our master transportation plan for this city of, for the Township of Langley. And it designates the entire network, and it's looked at in a broad context, in a more holistic context, and it designated 24th Avenue as an arterial street and showed it connecting through to Surrey. The major road network and the transportation plan helps guide council and staff on investments, upgrades, and tough decision making, like opening or closing a road. And so I think it's really important to bear homage to the master transportation plan and the Brookswood Fernridge Community Plan, which had a lot of consultation. I now want to talk about a myth buster, and that is that opening or closing a road or widening roads doesn't change. It doesn't increase or decrease the amount of traffic. What it does do is it redistributes the traffic. If you imagine a screen line up the Surrey-Langley border, you get a certain amount of traffic crossing over that screen line, and it's growing. Campbell Heights is growing, Brookswood is growing, the traffic volumes are going to grow both ways. Adding a connection actually redistributes that traffic so that there's the absolute number of cars isn't changed, but it's redistributed, and if it's done right, and I believe an arterial road should be open, it actually results in a reduction in traffic overall on individual roads so that the capacity on each road is better optimized. It also reduces the amount of vehicle kilometers that vehicles travel because they've got a shorter direct route. Talk a little bit about the pros and cons of opening 24th Avenue. 24th Avenue would provide a direct route. My wife and I commute over to everything from the A&W that's across the street there to the Grandview Heights Aquatic Center in the city of Surrey, to the church at Good Shepherd on 24th and 152nd. Right now, with 24th Avenue closed, we've got two choices. We can either go down to 16th Avenue, which is one of the corridors that they're on, and I'm sure it's well deserved. The RCMP hot corridors. And if we come back along 16th Avenue, we're actually forced to make a left turn at 196th Street where there's no left turn bay. And I sit in that through lane and cars pass me on the right on the shoulders. There's not enough room for trucks. And I look forward to 197A and 16th Avenue where a young boy was killed in a rear end accident. They were turning left into 197A and they were rear-ended by a truck, and the young boy in the back was killed. I can go up to 200th Street, make a left turn at the traffic light with a left turn bay and circulate around, and a lot more travel. But it's an option. Opening up 24th would allow us to take a more direct route. It would get us out to a traffic light at 192nd. The other option is 28th Avenue, and I've been to way too many car crashes at 28th and 200th. We lost the fellow there with Jim's towing. It's a collector road. That traffic shouldn't be on the collector. It should be down on 24th at the arterial at the four-way stop location. There's a challenge with opening 24th. I appreciate there's going to be changes in traffic. I know Councillor Ferguson lives on 24th Avenue. It is going to be a dramatic change, but it's a change that's going to need to happen, and I say it's better to happen sooner rather than later, and get that traffic opened and as soon as any upgrades can be made. Your staff made a recommendation report. Council first dealt with this issue back in October, I think it was, or September. And they referred it to staff for a report.
If you could just wrap up your 5 minutes.
The report came back and said you could open the road unless directed otherwise. And council directed otherwise. And I am here today to tell you, please consider opening it up at its earliest opportunity. I think there are very modest changes that need to be made, and it would benefit the overall community. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Ferguson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mooney. Thank you very much for coming today. I see your brave Jackie's here as well. That means she's going to keep you in line and keep you well behaved, of course. We didn't take the decision lightly. As you know, I did have a chance to talk to you on the phone, and we did discuss it with the school district, some of the 5 surrounding mobile or manufacturing home parks from some residents. So if some people are in favor, many people are opposed. We even have a letter in our distribution today of somebody who lives on the road that's opposed. But that doesn't mean, I know you're a patient person, that in the future this road will open up because it's part of our major network, and we're aware of that, and as Brookswood grows. Because you're here today doesn't take away the fact that we're concerned about 28th Avenue and some of the surrounding corridors. And, the police were here today, and after your delegation today, I myself and perhaps other members of council will be deferring it to staff to look into some of your safety concerns on those corridors. So I didn't want you to walk away today thinking that we aren't concerned about some of the things you brought to our attention. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you. Okay, the next delegation is...
Declare a conflict. Yeah, just for the clerk, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest, and I've asked for a varying of the agenda. Hopefully council will support that, so I don't have to come and go twice. Hopefully you'll deal with J1 after the delegation.
So if there's no opposition from council, we'll take J1 immediately after the delegation. I don't see any problems, so that's what will happen. Thank you. Welcome here. And we're going to E2, the delegation, and then immediately following E2, we'll go to J1.
So that's just not my presentation that I sent in. Oh, thank you. All right. So hi, my name is Lisa Smith. I'm the president of the Fort Langley Business Improvement Association. And I'm here this afternoon to speak to you about a renewal that's up for discussion today later in the council meeting. We submitted our application at the end of August to provided a business plan as requested by staff before the end of September. A report to Mayor and Council was given to you for the December 2nd meeting, which includes most of our business plan. We were surprised by the report and found some of its views misleading and incorrect in some key areas. We submitted our own letter of response before the Monday meeting. We want to thank you for deferring your decision about the BIA until this meeting. It has given us a chance to meet with almost all of you to go over the report, responses, and the legislation in more detail. Our organization currently has 147 members that include property owners and tenants. However, the petition for or against this levy is only voted on by the commercial property owners. In the December 2nd report to Council and in the memorandum that followed, it stated that the TOL staff will be responsible for conducting the recommended petition for process. However, as we read Section 213 of the Community Charter, a petition that is a Council initiative is only allowed to be a petition against process. We have asked for clarification on the process of BIA renewals from the BC Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and we're told that there are only two ways to approve a Class 5 and Class 6 landovers for a BIA, and the two are, the first one being that the petition for, which is initiative by the BIA, and a petition against, which is a council initiative. We believe that it is very unfair to be asked by the Township of Langley at this late stage to begin a petition for approval process. Such a request appears to be contrary to the legislation, as it is currently not the initiative or the preference of the FLBIA. While staff has stated that the Township of Langley will contact the owners to conduct a petition, the job to communicate with all of the owners and to convince them that they should want to continue paying a higher tax rate would be on the shoulders of our volunteer board of directors. When the original petition was done in 1997, it took over a year of relationship building and convincing to get enough signatures for the formation of the BIA. To ask us to undertake such a task in just over a month is absurd. It will likely lead to the BIA failing to attain the necessary threshold and to ultimately the folding of our BIA. The recommendation for an assent petition is not justified. It has never been required in the past, and we ask that it is not required now. We would also like further information from the staff report's second recommendation that CM Quantland Business Group become a member of the FLBIA. The BIA boundaries include Leland Cafe, which is owned and operated by the CM Quantland Business Group, and thus, from our society's perspective, they are already members. We agreed to the last three staff recommendations as a compromise position, but feel the recommendations seem to be based on a belief that our organization is in need of more oversight. The evidence for this seems to come from a handful of complaint letters from disgruntled members, most of whom are not able to vote in this petition for renewal. While we take these complaints very seriously, it seems excessive to base our renewal and the use of township resources to appease this minority view. We also want to address the financial deficits that were mentioned in the staff report. We did have deficits in 2017 and 2018, but it was because the organization had built up a large cash reserve to deal with expenses related to the undergrounding process. The spending of these years was carefully considered and done with specific intention. The money was not spent because we lacked the ability to budget or because of mismanagement of funds. At no time did we ever spend money we did not have. We ask that the TOL provides us with written guidelines and timelines for future renewals. We ask that we arrive to mutual and reasonably we ask that we mutually arrive at reasonable requirements for our renewal process. And we ask that Council carefully examines all of the recommendations made by staff and to also consider our recommendation that you approve a 3-year BIA renewal conducted by the Township of Langley through a petition against process. This follows what has been done in the past and what the legislation in the Community Charter dictates. Over the next 3 years, and with engagement and consultation with the current board of the FLBIA, the TOL can develop and rework its renewal policy that we can follow with confidence to the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Richter has a question. Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you very much. So we're being asked to vote on 5 recommendations today. Based on what you've just said, it almost sounds to me like 3 of those aren't necessary.
That is a council decision. We
Yeah,
would agree with that. But
Yeah, because you're saying the first one you want to go with the assent petition, not an assent petition, but the way that you've done it for how many years now?
since 97.
Since 97. In the second one, the Kwantlen First Nation are members and they're
Yes,
able
they
to
are.
attend. So that's not necessary. The third one, the performance report, is that required under the legislation?
It is not required. The financial statements that were requested in there is something we already provide. We weren't given specific information of what an annual performance report would include. Looking at other BIAs, some do require this, some that do not. When you look at provincial requirements for a performance report, they're a 50-page document, and being a volunteer board with a minimal budget, I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for or simply a page-long summary. So it was hard to say without more specifics.
Okay, and the research that you've done, how many, like what percentage of BIAs have these and what percentage don't?
I don't know that. Yeah.
Okay, and then the businesses are already aware that they can be nominated and elected, right?
Yeah, that comes in our AGM packages that we take out to all of our members. We have under 200 members, thus we have to either mail them out or hand deliver them. We tend to do both. We also email them. We also post it in the post office, and we try to drop in all the mailboxes in the post office that are with businesses as well.
Okay, and then putting a staff member on your board, do other BIAs do that?
Not that I have been in contact with any of the ones, not that I've heard. It is with the Tourism Langley. I think that's where this came from. They are a different organization with a much larger budget, with having Township paying them a fee every year of about $50,000 from my understanding as well. So we kind of run on a very different platform than them, but I think that's where the comparison came from.
Okay. So none of these recommendations from your perspective are really necessary?
No, nor have they ever been required in the past. In the packages that we've sent out to everyone, there was the letter that was provided by staff last time, and none of these recommendations were mentioned at all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. I know we had a great conversation. I learned a lot. So once we get to our discussion regarding this, then I'll bring up some points. But we do need to give, I just want to make clear, and I think staff can help me, we do need to give direction to staff moving forward. We can't just let this go. There has to be some direction. So by saying that none of these are matter, we have to give some direction, especially on the first point, one way or the other. So that's your understanding?
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah,
we asked at
that's
the
right.
end of the presentation, that we can work in
That's
the
right.
next 3 years after, as this renewal goes on, that we can find some process that we can follow.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you for that. We're going to move to J1, and this is now Ms. Bauer. This has been moved and seconded, so it carries on. So I'm going to recommend, or actually I'm going to make an amendment to this motion that the words assent and of support be taken out and that the word against be put in. So BIA renewal to follow a petition against process. Does that make sense to staff? And that's the intent, I think, of what the presentation was. And I do believe we do need to give that direction to staff to move forward with this. So it's changing it from an assent petition of support to petition against process. So I'm adding that word in and taking out the words assent and of support. Ms. Bauer, is that for the first point?
Can we deal with one at a time?
We can. Then we can divide. So we'll divide. So okay, I'll do a second motion to divide. So I'll just do a quick show of hands on the division. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we'll start with number 1. So I'm going to make that amendment to change it to an against. So I'm moving it. Councillor Long has seconded it. So on number 1, changing it from a assent petition of support to against. Questions on that part, Councillor Richter?
So the petition against is the process that they currently have in
That's
place?
the process that's been followed over the last several years, and I've discussed with staff and understand many other BIAs follow the same process. There is certainly an argument to be made, I'm not going to make it today, that some of our other processes are more in line with an assent petition. However, the BIA has been using this process in the past, and other BIAs in our area are using this process, so I'm comfortable with that change. So, okay, so I'm going to call a question on the first part, J1. And I'm just going to, I didn't take Councillor Woodward out, so I'm just going to mark him absent, and then we'll go back to the vote. Sorry about that. So we'll take the vote again. Thank you. So it carries. Councillor Arneson is opposed. So now on the second point, I think this was some clarification that I gleaned since the last meeting, and the fact that the Sam Kwantlen is a tenant in the BIA area allows them to attend meetings and to vote and to put their name forward on the board if they so wish. Because they're a tenant, they don't get to vote on this petition. It's a Township of Langley owned property. So it seems to me, and I'll check with staff there, that the amendment would be to remove paragraph 2 because it's mute.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't even think we need it if they're
That's right,
already
yeah.
members.
They already are, and I think it was just a communication. And communication has been going out, from what I understand from the BIA, has been going out to Sam Kwantlen, and who knows which email it went to. But in our conversation, they're certainly reaching out to make sure that all the parties understand that they are full members of the BIA. So with that, I'll call the question on that one.
Your Worship,
Oh,
just to clarify, so we're on the same page. It's fine, just for disclosure purposes.
Yeah.
The key language was require. The requirement then is not necessary, but will go without the paragraph. Then the offer of money from the Kwantlen, it also would be discretionary. So the requirement would mean that they would have to pay. No requirement means it's optional.
Optional. Okay. So yeah, and that's going back to the fact that they're tenants in the Township of Langley owned property, which doesn't pay the property tax; it's exempt, so they're not contributing into the membership. But I don't know if we can we actually comply them to do it, require them to do it by motion when they don't really need to. They're a tenant. I'm just
I think your point is, even if they're required to be part of it, then is a requirement that they pay. That was the intention, that the requirement would be met by the requirement to pay. That's one question. By removing it, they still are able to be, I guess, part of the process, but there's then no legal or moral argument that they would have to pay.
And that's the way it's been happening over the past so many years since they became tenants there. And I haven't heard from the BIA or them that they wish to pay. It's something that came on the motion. So I'm happy if council wants to change it, but I'll leave this as it is. Okay, so call the question. Okay, there's more information. I'm going to cancel the vote. Councillor Long?
Yeah, so I'm confused about that. So Township owns a number of properties potentially in the BIA area. Certainly it must pay its portion of the levy.
No, we're exempt, Your Worship.
No, it's not.
So that means everybody else has to pay more because the budget has to be raised.
Correct. From the benefiting property owners, excluding the township, they must make up the portion. I mean,
Are we sure that that's correct in all districts? Because it doesn't sound fair to me. I mean, if we own property there, we should be paying it like everybody else. Otherwise, the poor neighbor who's not exempt has to pay extra.
General principle is, quite often when we do have property, we're not operating businesses, so then for it would be discretionary. We could choose to pay, then it becomes a budget item, but if the legislation would not require us to pay, for example, if it was parkland or something of that nature. That's why it's not mandatory.
Okay, well, given that, then how are we going to handle this then?
So if council wishes to, and I believe there's been discussion with the Sam Kwantlen that they are willing to pay the levy that would be required, then it would just mean an amendment to my amendment that would include or put back in or just the non-levied monetary contribution from St. Cortland for the term of the bylaw, so that they.
Well, so Your Worship, I would suggest that the township pays and it has to recoup the money from its lease,
No, it's through.
just like
it's,
everybody
it's
else.
the other way around. It'd be recouping for the lease, or we can have an agreement with the same Cortland where they just pay it to the BIA, and either way they'd pay.
The issue would be if it was through the lease, the question would be, is that actually an additional cost if it's discretionary as opposed to mandatory? So therefore, we could be paying it, but may not be able to achieve the flow through. That's why this mechanism was suggested, that it would be a non-monetary levied amount that would be in exchange effectively for their membership.
Well, Your Worship, don't we have other properties? What about the Trinity House there? Don't we own that too and lease that to the Trinity, so they're not paying either?
Actually, Trinity, they are
Outside.
paying a nominal rent for the purposes of actually as our security people there, because we're not actually trying to make any money on it. We're trying to maintain the property because they're only using a very small portion.
But are they members of the BIA then? Apparently they are.
They're within the BIA. If they're within the BIA catchment area and they're a tenant, then they are automatically a member.
So they have to pay
So there
too.
is precedent. So either this could be taken out and Sam Cortland can work with the BIA and work with the township and still do it without a motion, or we could comply them to do it, require them to do it. So
I guess the way
it
I
would
feel
require
is
a motion.
that we own a couple of properties at least that we've identified, I'm not sure what else, that the township owns and rents out to commercial businesses, or whatever you want to call them. In the case of Trinity, perhaps that may or may not be accurate, but I think it still is an operating business. And
Bishop,
therefore, we should be paying the fee and recouping it if we can or cannot from our tenants. Is totally up to the deal that's made with the tenants.
I think we're perilously close to classifying the university as a commercial enterprise. The reason why it's not is not because of its business, but because they're prohibited from doing anything that would be competing with other businesses in the BIA area. Their requirement is that they're simply acting as caretakers, and if they're charging anything, it would be a nominal fee to recover from their students, but they don't offer food or services that would compete, say, with the
But
other
they are
businesses.
active members of the BIA.
They are members of the BIA, that's correct. They are active, and that's what this resolution would do with Kwantlen. It could make them active members in exchange for the non-monetary levy.
Just to be clear, the Kwantlen are members, the fact that they're tenants. It's just the levy issue. So the way to change this, if we want to require Sam Kwantlen to pay the levy, then we need a motion to do that. So that would mean I've moved to remove this. It would be an amendment to that to leave in the piece where that they would have a contribution from Sam Cortland.
Worship, it need not be included. We're just clarifying the purpose behind it.
Yeah.
The council can proceed. It's just so that it's done with full knowledge.
That's right, and that's what I'm saying. That if council wishes to do that, then we'd have to have a motion to comply.
Well, I think Trinity
Otherwise,
has
they
to-
could do it voluntarily.
And Trinity Western has to be treated the same way.
Then, yeah, so then we're not dealing with Trinity Western, we're dealing with this one paragraph. So my motion is to take it out. We could always move to put something else in. So, Councilor Richter?
Yeah, if none of the other tenants are required to pay a levy, why would we single out the First Nation to pay a levy? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I think it's inappropriate. And they're a tenant, they should be treated like any other tenant. The other tenants don't pay, they shouldn't have to pay. So that's why I think this thing should just go.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call the question then on the amendment.
That's to remove it?
To remove it, remove paragraph 2. And it carries unanimously. And then paragraph 3, 4, and 5 are really, I don't see an issue with. I'm quite happy with them being in there, and if council wishes to make any changes, I did check with our people in the tax department, because it is a requirement that we get financial statements. The performance report or business plan or something like that can be a one-pager, but that's up to, I think that's, we're not too strict on that. It's just some sort of, because we are collecting a tax on behalf of the BIA and remitting it to the BIA, and I'll just remind council that the amount that's given to the BIA is a grant. We collect a tax, and it's a grant that goes to them. So, like all grants, there is some accountability. I don't think, and I haven't heard that they're opposed to that. Because we've separated, I'll deal with paragraph 3, and so that's moved and seconded. Councilor Richter. Paragraph 3.
Was paragraph 3, well, we've divided, okay.
Yeah, we've divided, yeah.
But we've just heard that they're a group of volunteers. They're volunteering their time. So we're not going to be expecting them to hand over like a 50-page report, are we? Just a sheet of activities and then a second sheet with their financial statement?
Their financial statements are required. The performance report can be as detailed or as undetailed as they want. I think it's just a matter of saying we'd like to see something. And some other BIAs, when I was looking through other BIAs, some do, some don't. They call it a business plan. They call it a variety of different things.
But is it a requirement under the legislation?
It's usually a requirement under the BIA bylaw of each different city or municipality.
Okay, is it in our BIA bylaw then? Maybe that's the question I should be asking.
The financial statements is a performance report. I don't believe, is it in there? It is? No.
The financial statements are, the performance is not. Effectively, this would include it into our bylaw going forward.
Okay, so
we'd have to amend the bylaw then, wouldn't we?
This motion is just to direct all of the process. The bylaw would come back with whatever we decide today to put into the bylaw. Right. We're not voting on the bylaw. When the bylaw comes back, clarification on that could be in the bylaw based on our discussion. But we're not voting on a bylaw. We're just giving staff direction to go out and do the petition and come back with the necessary bylaw. And there is a legislative time frame because it has to go out with the tax notifications that we have to follow. And so generally in March sometime we have to give final reading to this bylaw.
Okay, so if it's not in the bylaw and we don't know if, or we do know, I guess some other areas aren't requiring it, why are we requiring it?
Well, it's up to council.
I mean, the financial statements I can see, but...
Yeah, Your Worship, as we know, there's varying opinions for and opposed to some of these initiatives, and what we're simply trying to do is gather information to defend the activities of the BIA. In that way, the BIA can actually state their own case in terms of their values, so it gives us an easy document to remit to parties that are suggesting that they're not performing optimally.
Okay, so do we have parameters for what this annual performance report is going to look like?
So the parameters, Your Worship, would be what the BIA feels is going to help us help them in moving forward. So again, as you referenced, it can be as extensive or as brief as they choose. We're not trying to create any additional work, but simply going to have a document that will assist in rebutting suggestions that the performance could be enhanced.
So it could just simply be a list of the activities that they've financially
That's correct.
supported.
Yes.
Yeah. It could be as simple as that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
I think Councillor Richter clarified a number of things, but just a very simple one on paragraph 3. Are they not already doing many of these things already, if I may, through a chair?
They're working very hard on their initiatives, Your Worship. They're trying to do it. We're simply trying to streamline it because, as we're aware, in many communities there's pros and cons, and we're trying to minimize some of those parties or cons that may exist.
I mean, I understand, like, for example, they probably, a performance report could be, you know, very small or very large, depending on what they want and how creative they are. They probably have their own financial they're putting together, and I think we just have to work together with them until, that's why the question was asked, whether it was required or not. But anyway, I'll listen to what the rest of the debate has.
Thank you, yeah. And just to remind, it is a significant grant, although it's taxed by the properties in that area pay a tax, which the township collects and remits to the BIA as a grant. So it's a significant grant. So it's not out of line for council to ask for this, but we're not asking for, you know, a professionally produced 50-page document like you mentioned. I think we're asking just for, I mean, you do the Cranberry Festival. Let's hear about that. Let's hear about some of the wonderful things that you do. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So just for clarification to Mr. Backen, I'm just wondering whose responsibility is it at the end of the day for the scope of their reporting? Is it up to council ultimately to make that determination about what we expect? Or would it be staff's consideration or a combination?
Council could intervene and put some requirements in, I suppose. Otherwise, staff would be looking just at their submission to ensure there was a submission. So if council wanted to list some detailed elements, that could be done. Our focus is much different, though. Our focus is simply to hear from them in terms of what their achievements are and how they would like us to be able to communicate on their behalf with entities that have need information or questions about their performance.
Okay, and just also then to clarify where I was coming from, so I wouldn't want to make it too onerous on their organization, so the expectation of what this could look like would be significant to me. And I understand that, we're just trying to glean information if that's what we're doing, but to keep the expense and the consumption of time down would be important to me.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on paragraph 3. Yeah, I was just calling the question on paragraph 3.
Mover and seconder, Your Worship.
Oh, it's been moved and seconded. Everything's been moved and seconded, yeah. And that carries with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Richter opposed. So paragraph 4, and I think they're already doing this. It's something that just we want to ensure that is being done, but I think they're already doing it, so leaving it in doesn't hurt. I'd like to remind Council also, there's one BIA in the Township of Langley, and if more come along, others are looking at it. This does set sort of a bit more direction for new BIAs also, what's expected. It's not saying that this BIA doesn't do it, but there are other BIAs or other business organizations in the township looking to form a BIA, and this certainly, we want to make sure it's something that's good for all BIAs. Councillor Richter on paragraph 4.
Yeah, I was just going to say this probably wouldn't be a tough one, just simply because they have to, I understand that they hand deliver the agenda packages, so maybe they could just include a flyer in there saying you can run for office if you want.
It's part of the communication, I think. Yeah. Okay, I'll call the question on paragraph number 4. Carries unanimously. And then paragraph number 5 is township staff, and I know it varies throughout the region. We do have an example in the township, as was referenced with Tourism Langley. This person, whoever's appointed by the director, would not have a voting capacity and is there. And I know we had a good discussion. It's also, I think, a resource to help out with some of these issues if there are similar to what happens at the Tourism Langley. There is a resource that can be utilized, but certainly not there to direct. Councillor Richter.
I'd like to move to remove this requirement.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds, so we're going to go to the amendment to remove.
And I'd like to speak to the removal.
Yes.
I think this is particularly onerous and entirely not necessary. And besides which, it's a very, we're talking about expensive staff time here, and interfering in the business of the BIA, I don't think is the role of the township. And we collect it. The money's being used for community activities. I think that's the only thing we should be worried about. So I think this, and we've got so many other projects that our staff can get involved in that they shouldn't have to be, we shouldn't be forcing them onto the BIA like this. So I'm not in favor of this one.
You are in favor
I
of the
don't
amendment?
see this as being a terrible negative. It seems to have been a staff's recommendation, so obviously staff have got the time allotted or the time available to them, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to have some help there. So I don't see a downside to it. I think it should, if staff want to be on it, let them be on it.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
I just want a clarification as well. Are they? I think the Fort Langley BIA. I know they have meetings. Obviously, do staff attend their meetings right now of ex officio just to sit in on the meetings? They don't right now.
I think staff have attended the AGM. They have attended some of the other public meetings, the actual board meetings. There's some. I don't believe they have. Mr. Backen.
Be by invitation, as I understand it, Your Worship. Yeah. I could be corrected, but I think it's the AGM you're referencing is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my next question, I'm just trying to clarify this. Is there a benefit or a reason for staff to want to be involved at this level, if I may? Because I'm reading the report, I'm not really, unless it's on one of the pages, I'm not seeing anything on the report saying why staff would want to participate.
Your Worship, I guess intrusion and persistence are probably the only items of concern. I think it was viewed as being a way to assist them achieve their objectives and goals. As it is right now, sometimes the communications are muted or lost through the process. The thought process, I think, was to have a member there such that they could actually be in the ex officio capacity and help steer or interpret some of the information being provided.
I mean, we have community, you know, the Fleece Committee, the Fort Langley Economic Enhancement Committee, we have the other committees and things like that, that they were actually Township of Langley type of committees, and members and staff used to show up and they work on stuff. If there's, you know, not a rationale for it, I'm just wondering, right now, maybe we could let that go and in future bring it up if there's a need, if it comes from the organization. That's certainly where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, and that's a good point, Councillor Ferguson. It would seem to me that they've been invited, township staff have been invited before, plus they already attend the AGM. I don't think that we need to interfere any more than that. I think that we should just delete this, and if the BIA needs to have assistance from the township, they can request it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is on an amendment to remove paragraph 5. I'm not going to support the amendment. I think this is a good idea, and I heard from the delegation that they were okay with these last 3 paragraphs, so I'm taking that into consideration, and I don't think it'd be onerous if it certainly is. I think we'll hear about it. So I think it can be an asset and an assistance to them because they are run by volunteers. They don't have, it's difficult to have paid staff on that budget. And so if we can aid them, and again, this goes forward to other BIAs as they're starting up, they may be thankful that they get some assistance. So I'm not going to support the, this is not working out. There we go. Oh, yeah, I am, but I pushed the wrong button here. So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. And the amendment fails on a tie vote, so I can see where the rest is going to go. Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kunst, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long opposed. So we're back to the main motion, and that is paragraph 5 as it stands. And the elimination fails. So now we're into the inclusion. So if that fails, then we're back to be the same thing. So I'm going to call the question. No, Councillor Long, did you wish to speak?
So let's be clear, then, Your Worship. So that is remaining in because it failed.
It remains in.
So now
but
we're
we still
voting
have to,
on everything?
No, we're voting on the 5th paragraph. So the
But
5th paragraph.
if it failed to come out, it must be successful to stay in.
No, it was an amendment to.
Oh, okay,
To,
fine. But
it was,
Your Worship,
it was an amendment to take it
All right,
out.
all right.
So now we still have to vote
I'll
on
play
it because
along,
the
but
amendment
I
failed.
do have another motion before we're finished with this, okay?
Okay, so
please?
you're on then.
Well, yes.
No, because
I have another motion to put on, but, so when do you want that?
as a separate motion or an amendment to this?
It'll be an amendment to the 5.
Amendment to the 5. So we're on the last paragraph. So would we vote on this and then take an amendment? Because I'm looking to.
No, it's not
1, 2,
5
3,
anymore.
4, 5. This is the 5th paragraph. We have to call the vote. If Councillor Long wishes to make an amendment.
So, Your Worship, so far we've successfully processed 4.
Yes.
There's no need to go back to those in
That's
any
right.
way, shape, or form.
Right.
We're on the 5th. Right now, there was a suggestion to remove the 5th. So right now, we're in a nullity situation where we have a recommendation to include. It's quite likely that will also be defeated, and then that will dispose of it, and then we can go to Councillor Long's
Okay,
motion.
sure. So we'll dispose of this, and then we'll go to you. Okay. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the 5th paragraph. We'll see what happens with that. Have staff on, yeah. So now if you're, yeah. We'll see what happens with that. Drum roll. And it fails. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. So that fails. So that effectively takes out paragraph 5, correct? So now Councillor Long, you wish.
I'll tell you. Okay. Now,
tie vote.
Okay, we had a discussion here on paragraph 2, and I don't think we have a successful solution to it yet, so I'd like to propose that the Township of Langley properties within the BIA area, the business improvement area, pay its portion of any levies with an appropriate cost recovery mechanism potentially from tenants. And I put appropriate in there because if it doesn't want to take the money from the tenants, that's up to them. But in order for them, for the fairness of the other owners, property owners, it's just not fair that the other property owners are paying more because the township seems to be exempt for some reason. And it also to legitimize the participation of the tenants in the BIA.
So the actual motion is to, no, it's a motion.
Hey, be quiet over there.
No, the motion is an addition, it'd be paragraph 6, it'd be point 6 of this, and the motion is to have those tenants, or those properties which are owned by the Township of Langley, which are within the Business Improvement Association, which have tenants, so basically not a residential, like they have to be class 5, class 6, right? They're not residential, that the township pay the equivalent levy to the BIA and then recover it through
an appropriate mechanism.
Your Worship, there's two components to that. There is the, I guess, the classification of township-owned properties, and then there's the recovery. Karen, I'd have to defer to you then in terms of, I think residential would be exempt, but what types of properties would be included, commercial, industrial, institutional?
It's class 5 and class 6 properties are included in the BIA. I was just trying to find a property in Fort Langley to see if I could see from the township's perspective, but if they're classified any other class, then they wouldn't even come into question.
Class 5 or 6. And then,
so institutional.
Karen, what are class 5 and class 6?
Class 5 is light industrial and class 6 is business and other.
Okay, so 5 and 6 then.
Then the only question would be the flow through. It may mean that we would have to pay for some of these ourselves till they flowed through, depending upon the tenancy or leasehold obligations.
And weren't there discussions with Sam Contland that they would just pay us, so we could just, the easiest one would be to require Sam Contland to pay an equivalent sum? Or is that more difficult?
The challenge, I guess, becomes even though it's a commercial property, what is the operation? Let's use a different location. It's a nice, safe one. Aldergrove, for example, if it's a community-use building, it may be having that designation. It's not a BIA area, so it doesn't apply to it. But that organization could be required to pay, even though they're marginally a commercial business.
Okay. So the motion has been moved. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder?
You're not going to second it?
Well, we need a seconder. Is there a seconder? See, don't, if you're not going to vote, okay. Okay, you're seconding it? Okay, so it's been seconded by Councillor Arneson. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to that?
I just think this is horribly unfair to the two tenants that we have that would fall into this category, one being the First Nations group and the other being a university. Like, this is a bad idea and I don't support it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to call the question. Oh, Councillor Long?
Okay, so what are we talking about being a bad idea? So we're in business here, right? And I know you teach business, so the council does anyway.
Just speak, excuse me.
So we're in business
to the
here.
Motion, please.
We're leasing property to commercial enterprises, whether they're from First Nation, Trinity Western, or whatever. They are classified as commercial or industrial. They want to participate in the business improvement area goings on. They want to be board members. Some of them are, I believe, or they want to vote. They want to be part of the process. That's what the report is telling us. So how do we legitimize their participation in the BIA? They have to be members. So if we do not pass this motion, then they cannot be members. Excuse me. They cannot legitimately, in my mind, be members because they're not paying. So that's all there is to it. And I don't think there's any issue. If the township wants, that's why I put appropriate mechanisms. Maybe we'll go 50-50, maybe we'll charge them whatever. But most certainly, in the case of Lalem Cafe that's owned by the township, we must be receiving some kind of rent for them, and that rent should be able to cover these kinds of levies as it does cover everything else in terms of property management and snow removal and all the things that are required to operate a business is taken up by the rent that's paid. And if operating a business within a BIA and there benefits from a BIA, then that should be paid also. So I don't understand where council is puzzled on this. It's actually the only way to be fair. And keep in mind, if we don't pass this motion, which maybe it won't, then the other property owners are actually paying extra, aren't they? Because you have to meet the budget. The budget that that's going to be approved of $200 and whatever thousand dollars, or 100 and whatever it was in the report, is raised from the levy. So if township's not paying their portion of that levy, and though they do own commercial property in the BIA, then I suppose the other folks that own property there are paying extra. Now that's just not fair.
Okay, so just to be clear, the fact that they're tenants, they are members. That doesn't take that away. So this is only that, and as occurs with other tenants, they're paying rent. The property owner pays the levy, and I'm thinking there may be some mechanism that the property owner is taking from the rent, a portion of the rent to cover that or however they do it, unless they're paying the tax. So I don't see this as any different than any other one if we're doing it that way. It may mean that it happens the next time the rent is negotiated, but I have no problem with this one.
So just to be clear, then, sorry, Your Worship, I don't mean to labor it on.
So you're saying
so what you're saying is even if the township is not paying its levy, and the tenant is not paying its levy, they are members.
They are members
because of
because they're a tenant.
So anyone that leases property from a local government in a BIA kind of gets a free ride.
In this instance, there is no levy being paid towards the tax levy is not being remitted to the township. But other tenants.
But it's on the backs of the other property owners.
It is divided amongst. Yeah, you're correct there. Okay, I'm going to call the question on this. I think it's fairly simple. Okay, and it fails. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. All right, so now we're complete with this. So now we can move on. So we'll ask Councillor Woodward to return. And we do. So, is this F1? Are you declaring? Okay, so you can escape then. Okay, so now we're going to move on. Now, under the new procedure bylaw, 6 o'clock is we need a motion. So I'm going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting to no later than 6:30 to complete. I think we'll be done much sooner than that, but you never know. Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so the next item is F1. That's a proposed expansion of the Fraser sewerage area. Councillor Ferguson moves it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I want to know what's going to be going on that property that requires a sanitary sewer extension.
Your Worship, I believe that's the future home of the new business school.
Okay, and does TWU pay taxes? I'm just curious.
Well, this would be a utility. They'd pay the utility. They would be subject to the utilities fee for this, wouldn't they? I'm just checking.
Correct on utility fees, Your Worship. The question is, I guess, is taxes. I believe they're exempt.
I believe I've been asked this one recently, and they are exempt.
But they're not exempt from. Are they exempt
Not
from
from utilities?
Not the utilities, but from
utilities.
property taxes, because they fall into the institutional rate for other, as being a university, as would other universities if we had any schools.
And for this though, it's sewage, so they would be paying the utility. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Davis.
Right. Okay, this piece. First of all, who owns it?
The school.
Trinity owns it, and we approved a big building for there about a few months back, 5 or 6 or 7 months.
Development permit. That's correct.
Development permit. So any cost related to the provision of the sewer service will be borne by the property owner. So will they bring that sewer line in? It's actually.
Sewer actually runs in front of the area now. It's just that parcel is not part of the area. So
okay, so that's okay. So getting it across the little creek there is not going to be a problem. Yeah.
Already there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Back, and then it just refers to this one lot and building, I assume, so nobody else would get the benefit of this lot in particular being serviced at some future point?
Again, the infrastructure that's there, as I recall, this relates in terms of a technicality as to the sewerage area. Its lot was not originally included, probably because it wasn't part of the original campus site. It's expanded over the years. So this is simply allowing that lot to hook into the sewer that's there.
And just, and and Councillor Davis pointed on this, that it says in the report there, all the costs will be borne by the proponent. So there isn't any associated or auxiliary cost to the township at all?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. See no further discussion. I'll call the question on F1.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, you can change it. I haven't.
Change it.
Have you changed it?
Yeah.
Okay. Carries unanimously. Okay, we can ask Councillor Whitmarsh to come back. Okay, the next F2 is information for receipt. So if council has any questions of staff, now's a good time to ask any questions on the report. If not, just a motion to receive. Councillor Richter, any questions?
Yes, page 39. Why was there a 217% overage in corporate admin legal fees?
Mr. Backen.
I guess this question comes up time to time, Your Worship. It's ostensibly due to the, I need to be careful on my topics, some of the larger enforcement actions or other cases council may have been part of or experienced, so it's simply the reflecting of our actual costs.
Okay, and also on page 10, the 115% overage in fiscal services and finance. If I'm reading that correctly, what's driving that?
Sorry, on page 10, and the line item again, Councillor Richter, sorry about that.
The 115% is in the bottom half of the chart, if I'm reading that correctly. Fiscal services, 115%.
Okay.
Year-to-date actual as percent of budget.
Yeah, that is our non-tax revenue for township services, so it very likely very likely investments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question is with regards to the papers or the pages page 15 on, there's a number of 100% of the budget remaining. Like at this stage in the game, obviously we're not going to spend any money on this, so why are these items even in our budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Richter, a lot of this third quarter actually captures one of our busier times, leading up to one of our busier times. So what happens is we will have between now, the third quarter and the end of the year, there are a lot of expenditures go on. The first part of the year is spent ramping up, getting purchase orders in place. So we will see some expenditures, but there will be some of these that are carried over. Sometimes they're carried over because they're waiting for another year's worth of funding to be added. But the fourth quarter is definitely where you'll see a lot of the finalizing of invoices.
Okay, so getting to that, the carryovers, because I was under the impression when we do the budget process that all of these items are key or critical items to be spending money on. Can we have an identification of which ones are carryovers from this year?
That's correct, Your Worship. As we get into the next budget cycle, we'll have the carryovers. I think what Karen was trying to say, sometimes these are third-party contractors, perhaps an overpass, sometimes it's the fisheries window we're waiting for. We're keenly aware and agree that we want to really understand the carry forwards as we go into the budget to see if there's anything that can be culled from those to reduce our ongoing, needs for the following year.
And if I could add one more thing, it was also partly due to the late budget adoption this year with the budget process falling over into the next year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I guess that maybe was my same thing. There were so many that are 100% on the third quarter, or no, the 9 months. Like the RCMP main detachment, the building improvements, and fire cessation and electrical upgrades. There's almost $1 million there, but they have drawn some down, and that's an existing building. The other thing is on page 23, the Blair Pool, Blair Recreation Center, in the 2019 budget, is that, but like we've only used 99% of it, we haven't used 99%, we haven't used 100, we've only, and on the boiler room, there's 50,000, that's 100%. And it would seem like I'm nitpicking here, but it's, was that for the upgrade that we did in 2018? Because this is for the budget 2019. This seems like a lot of money, 1,150,000 for mechanical and electrical and others. Was that money spoken for when we did the big upgrade, and we just haven't got to it and it's over?
I think that's correct. I think what you're saying is through that project we had a number of additional expenditures, if you will, and that we had to try to phase and deal with. So this represents the budget remaining as at the end of September, and much of the work then would be underway by the month of September but wouldn't be finalized, and we pay after the work is actually complete. So by the end of the fourth quarter we would anticipate that number being much more greatly reduced.
Okay, the last thing is with the railroad. We seem like we're not, it seems like there's, on page 26, there's the railroad crossing safety improvements, that's $3.5 million. That is been an ongoing thing that we're working with Canada Safety, we haven't spent a dollar. And that is, and then down a little lower, Mavis and Glover, there's $1.5 million there that we're going to spend. On 196, the railroad overpass, 96th Street. We just haven't spent any money, and then you go down on 72nd, and well, but that budget is only $1.5 million. I thought that was a $3 million project.
Your Worship, perhaps I can take a stab, and Karen can help if I don't get the accounting, I guess, processes exactly right. The requirement for us to account for these things as part of the budget process for some of these projects is for us to identify, I guess, holistically or at a broader level, the requirements. For example, for the rail improvement project, rail at-grade improvements, there were several projects. So this particular item that Councillor Davis identified started off as being $4 million. But then because money was taken out and used for specific line items, the accounting procedure still requires us to show the original item as being 100% unused. So it started off as being significantly more than what you see, but then that money is not being shown as being expended.
Okay. Karen?
Does that make sense?
And I can add to that as well, in that these railway projects were originally funded across 3 or maybe even 4 years. And then we just made a decision in the first year to borrow for them. So we borrowed for them all up front, even though we were planning to do them over a number of years, because they just physically couldn't get all done in 1 year.
Okay, the last thing is Councillor Coote said our last meeting we had, not in here, was with Gordon McIntosh, and she had talked about trying to find money internally in and we did that about 4 or 5 years ago. And we found I think we might have found $1 million or something like that. Anyhow, my point is, when it comes to when we take when we quote, and a lot of these numbers are budget remaining. For 2009, this is a different question, but how much, when we get to the end of the cycle with the 12 months, it takes a while, maybe a year or two, which is explained, but where do we see how much we've over budgeted or over, when you bid for a job, when we put that money in, do we ever see that come up in one line? Or does it stay with the actual, like the West Creek culvert replacement, 7,300 and 253rd, it was $36,000. If it was cheaper, where will we see that? Will it stay? I never see it in here. Like it says budget remaining, but where can we go back and say, hey, we want that, take that money that maybe we budgeted for, and if we got it, it was cheaper. Where do we see that money? Do we ever see that money?
Well, maybe. So yeah, it's a surplus. So if there's say $1 million, if a project is budgeted for $1 million, that money is going to come out of DCCs. It's going to come out of borrowings. It's going to come out of something. We spend $900,000 on it, not $1 million. The $100,000 is never spent, so it doesn't. It's not like there's money sitting there to go back. It's just not spent. So it's not borrowed. It's not taken out of the reserves, and so then that's where capital.
The numbers got to add up.
They do, but if you don't, if you plan for $1 million. It costs you 900. You don't go borrow $1 million and have 100 kicking around. You borrow 900. Mr. Backen.
I think there's two steps to the question. There's the reporting process and the ultimate, I guess, surplus in terms of what happens to it. So in the operating and capital throughout the year, I guess we would see the actual, the estimated or the actual, and then the budgeted amount. So some of these numbers, as one of the councillors was pointing out, were at 30 or 40% or something. That's something that's in process. At the end of the year, we can produce the list that shows which was under budget, which was over budget, which usually they're hopefully under budget, and that can apply to operating and capital. Any money that's derived from that, though, depending on its category, being capital or operating, then falls into our surplus. And our surplus numbers would probably generate about 2 to 3%, I guess, within 2 to 3% of our total operating budget, as an example. So that's a pretty good number. In real numbers, that 2 or 3% could amount to $6 or $7 million because of the size of the organization. So quite often, that money that's being spent by council on subsequent years' capital project is derived from those surplus monies, the operational savings that we have, and capital as well.
Okay, that leads me back to trying to find money. I know we get really good at quoting, but is that a place where we might be able to find $1 million or $2 million or something like that?
If we found $1 million or $2
million. That's dangerous, though, I guess.
Well, there's two components to that as well. We can reduce our surplus even more by actually trying to tighten up the processes that we have, which means then you're simply you're reducing some of your operational expenditures. Also, therefore, reducing some of your operational revenues. Therefore, reducing some of your capital expenditures because it flows through. That's one component to it. What Councillor Kuntz was talking about. What about more efficiencies? And those are something we always strive for. The challenge we face in local government, though, is if you have a certain period of either decreases or freezes where you're not allowing there to be growth, it's harder and harder to mine those. Now, you look for efficiencies all the time and try to use technology and new items. It's a very good question. It's just that in the grand scheme of things, a $20,000 savings certainly has to be something we want to pursue, but we don't want to spend $30,000 in trying to achieve it.
Okay, but I guess when my bank, I want to do a little project, and he always says, hey, you better borrow a little bit extra. So I always have that extra. I see that extra, and it just goes into my bank account. Here, Mayor Froh says, well, we don't spend it, but where do we see the reporting on it? Maybe this is a question. Maybe this should be when we go to the budget.
I think you're talking about the financial statements on a line by line. Then, where can we actually see, I guess, the actual source of some of those surplus numbers that we were at 98, 95, 90, 103, 105% of those expenditures, and those I think are in our financial reports that are generated. And Karen, I'm not quite sure. We circulate those as part of the budget process, I believe, but not so much during the year.
Yeah, they're part of the year-end closing off of the books, the year-end audit, where we go back out to the departments and ask them all to comment on all of the different projects and say, are you finished? Oh no, this one has to be carried forward. And then so we determine if a project should be closed, and the surplus, if there is any, just released to capital surplus, in which case, if that happens, it would be used in the next year's budget process as a source of funding. If it's not to be closed, then it just gets carried forward and it will show up in the next year's budget process as a project still in process using that funding. Sometimes you'll see them coming to council in a report saying we've got this new need and we've identified surpluses from these 3 projects that are finished, so we move that funding over to the new need.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes in a variety of forms.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, see no further questions, so I'm going to ask for a motion to receive. Motion to receive. Councillor Arneson moves. Councillor Davis seconds. I'm calling the question on F2. F2, just receipt. Yeah, you just ask questions to staff on. It carries unanimously. We move on to H1. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes and receive? Councillor Kuntz moves, second. Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter on H1. Anything on H1?
I wanted to ask a question about the Ag Advisory minutes.
Sure.
Page 3, it notes that there is a high probability that the farmers market will not open in 2020 unless other options appear, and there's a suggestion that the Langley Event Center parking lot would be a good location. I'm quite concerned about losing the farmers market because farmers market is a very strong pillar of a livable city. So I'm wondering, should we refer this to staff to look at other options for where they could relocate to that might have higher traffic opportunities for them? And maybe a change of the day. Instead of doing it on Wednesdays, do it like Saturday mornings or something in LEC.
Have they, I don't know who organizes this farmers market, but have they looked for other locations? I mean, the Langley Event Center won't work because we have events there. We can't have a big market on the Saturday when you got.
It all depends on traffic, Your Worship. Yeah. You're correct. So, yeah. But as we're beginning to stack issues, perhaps we could finish the receipt, then go into detail about any items to be raised. So if we can just wrap that up, then we can hear from the AEC advisor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's been moved. It's been seconded, I believe.
He just wants to vote.
Seconded. Yeah. So then we'll come up with some other options. I'm going to call the question on H1. Carries unanimously. Okay. So Councillor Richter's ask was.
We begin with the minutes do reflect, of course, that the potential minute operate. Perhaps the AEC advisor could advise what's behind that. That would probably help us. Is it locational? Is it timing? Is it supply?
So do you want to refer it back to the committee to look at options?
So
okay, I'll make that referral.
Moved by Councillor Richter, second by Councillor Ferguson to refer back just to get some options. Councillor Long?
Yeah, well, they should invite the directors of because we don't run that market.
No, that's right. So
they should get the directors there to talk to them, right?
Yeah, I know. We don't run the market, but maybe they could talk to the market people and find out if they want
people could come to the meeting.
Option. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, I'm going to call the question on that. Call it H1, is that correct? H1. Carries unanimously. All right, I1, could I have a motion, please, to receive the minutes? Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter on...
Yeah, I noted again, page 3, about the looking at a potential crosswalk between the buildings. This was a rainbow crosswalk between the school board office and the RCMP detachment. And I was wondering, is this coming to council, and do we pay for this crosswalk, or is the school district paying for it?
Mr. Bracken?
Your Worship, again, perhaps we could just finish the receipt, then go right to that question, because it's going to clog up our minutes if there's any resulting motions. So.
Oh, we won't do motions. I think it's just a question on that concern that was raised at the meeting.
So, to the meeting itself, then, it was discussed significantly, but there wasn't a motion coming from the committee. It was to be further discussed. As such, it'd be a bit premature to be talking, I guess, in terms of who'd be paying for it, because I'm not sure that idea was fully fleshed out with the township representatives that were present.
Okay.
Well, but the motion says that it carried. Yep. Recommend that the township consider a potential rainbow crosswalk between the buildings of the school board and the RCMP detachment.
No, that's correct. There was discussion at the table in terms of those representatives were there that there would be, I think, a further dialogue, but I don't think that was considered to be a recommendation to the respective committees yet. I think it's still forthcoming, so I think it may still be a work in progress.
Well, I'm just querying why, if they want a rainbow crosswalk, why don't they pay for it?
They'll be discussing, is that correct?
I think that's one of the discussion elements. I think that's why it wasn't actually a recommendation to council at this point, because there was still some loose ends to work out.
What it is, it says right there, recommend that the Township of Langley. It's right in the minutes.
Okay. No, I was there, as was 3 members of council, so they may wish to comment on it as well because they were present.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to call the question on receipt. Carries unanimously. Okay, so other business, Councillor Richter?
Well, no, I'm not done with these minutes
Okay.
yet. I had another question with
Sure.
regards to the pages 14 to 20. The actual students are not materializing, and I'm just wondering why. Do they have any idea why this is happening? I thought all the schools were overcrowded up there, and that's why we're spending $69 million to buy more land for them, or borrowing $69 million.
Mr. Backen?
I think their comments were geared primarily to the fact that when they were seeing construction developing, they weren't immediately seeing the students come online, and that may take a bit of time. For example, the suggestion was made of young families. They may move in and they may have not had school-age kids yet. That may take a few years before they become school-aged, so that their longer-term projections are seeing demand, but they're not seeing it immediately from the opening of the development. As well, the timing of the development process and the phasing was taking some time for there to be some additional, time frames to realize the actual students. Their long-term concerns still remain, especially as the students begin to age, as they're seeing growth actually occurring sometimes in the middle ranges without having it occur in the elementary ranges.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other business? Councillor Richter.
I had a resident call me about a cement box that's going in on 248th Street and Fraser Highway with, I guess, the redevelopment of the Otter Co-op gas bar. And their question was, will this hamper the widening of that intersection? Because I believe we've put some money away already to try to fix that intersection. And will the cement box, by its location, prohibit the widening of that intersection? So I was just wanting to bring that to staff's attention.
Okay.
Maybe Mr. Safey could look into it.
Okay, Mr. Safey, if you can just take a look. I don't think it requires a report back, but just be aware of it. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to refer the delegation, other than 24th Avenue, his concerns around 28th Avenue and safety around other, in his proposal he had his submission. So not necessarily 24th Avenue, but all the surrounding concerns he had regarding safety.
Okay, so Mr.
Staff to look at that?
Yeah, Mr. Seppi will just take a look at that. Thank you. Any other business? Seeing none, motion to terminate. Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you.